Thank you very much. And I'd like to bring up Bill Polchinski, better known as Broadway Blotto.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for nothing. I was supposed to give that speech. You rotten thief. Sarah, Yvonne, and Mr. Haymes, watching somewhere down south. Welcome, good evening. We're here to celebrate the life, the talent, the spirit, the influence, and genuine kindness of Gregory Charles Haymes, a.k.a. Wild Bill Hayes, Sergeant Blotto, Mesh Man, Hunky Man. We have plenty of names for him. He was a master of stage, screen, the written word, the artist's canvas, and whatever household items he could get his hands on. Welcome to Greg at the Egg. Back in 1970, Greg was a second-year theater major at Albany State, and we worked on an anti-war play together. I was a recent transfer who knew nobody on campus, while Greg knew plenty of people, and invited me into the circle. Before long, a bunch of us started spending time talking and laughing in the dorms, doing dumb dorm stuff, like moving furniture into the elevators and setting them up like lounges. Years later, Greg and I went into a Kmart, and back in those days, items weren't shrink-wrapped as they are today, and so we went to the toy section and the G.I. Joe section. And you can open the boxes and take things out. And that's what we did. We made this whole scene of G.I. Joes climbing out of their boxes, helping each other, climbing down the shelves. Anyway, in the spring of 1971, we really got to bond when we played pirates in the musical Peter Pan, which we also played in the theater upstairs. And we, did a lot of dumb pirate stuff. Like every time the pirates appeared on stage, a different one of us would be wearing the eye patch. Wait. We had a lot of fun. That summer, as Bowtie mentioned, the Washboard Band was born in Lake George and came back to college in the fall as a force to be reckoned with. A campus sensation. Musically polished, believe it or not, and hysterically funny. A rollicking great time. And by a stroke of fortunate timing, a personnel change meant that the band needed a new guitar player, and they asked me to join up, and I was ecstatic. And that's where it started, spending my time with some of the greatest guys in the world. And Greg was Wild Bill, and he eventually became Sarge, and the rest is showbiz history. Now, as an entertainer, Greg, Wild Bill, Sarge, was a combination of Elvis, Johnny Cash, Tom Jones, Bobby Darin, Mick Jagger, Jim Morrison, Aretha Franklin. And he was like an amalgamation of what they used to say about the Beatles. He was all the Beatles rolled into one. John, the smart one. Paul, the cute one. George, the quiet one. Ringo, the one who hit things. Sarge was great at hitting things. He hit cowbells, tambourines, bongos, cymbals, woodblocks, and all the high notes in the songs that he sang and that he made into rock anthems. I wish I had my glasses on. Boy, I wish I didn't need glasses. He bedazzled all who came to see him. There was an elderly gentleman who came to see the Washboard Band, and he mused after the show, you know, I don't know what it is that guy does, but he's really good at it. That's like the highest compliment. As a creative performing artiste, Sarge was driven, primarily because he didn't have a license. So the rest of us had to take him places. But regardless, he was always in motion, in mind or body, walking around the Bohemian district, Lark Street. Sarge was a presence who made many friends with whom he shared his knowledge of music and added to his own cerebral catalog. Like that one, Bowtie? Stole my speech. The friends he made were friends for life, as evidenced by all of us here, to remember him and the positive effect he had on everyone, even toddlers. In 1994, the band was having our pictures taken in a playground when my 3-year-old son, Will, slipped and fell. Like lightning, Sarge raced over, picked him up, made sure he was okay. Fast forward 6 weeks ago. I told my son Sarge was really ill. And he said, please tell him I said, get well, and thanks for picking me up. He remembered that from 25 years ago. I didn't even remember my son's name. And as Bowtie said, all good things must come to an end. But since this isn't so hot, I have a few more things. When Blotto stopped touring, Sarge became G.C. Haymes, mild-mannered entertainment reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper. He also became enamored with musician-artist Sarah Ayers. They married and built a life together, supporting and enjoying each other's creativity. 2 beautiful and lucky kids. He left us peacefully as he lived. Spending so much time with someone occasionally becomes routine, and we take each other for granted. Everything that he did came from his heart, directly to everyone else's heart. Sarge, we miss you. We love you. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we know that you're really good at it. Thank you. Thank you. I forgot my opening. I was going to say invited guests, bow tie, party crashers, hangers-on, and the tour group on the Empire State Plaza tour. But right now I'd like to introduce our next speaker. He's a singer-guitarist, a writer, a multi-instrumentalist, Mr. Michael Eck.
Yeah. It was in my damn contract to not have to follow Broadway. Those songs you love from Sarge Blotto, that's the man who wrote them. I'll try. I can't make any promises. This is a century-old mother of pearl, Mabie and Todd Company school pen. It's for dipping in ink. It implies process, it implies thought. It was given me by Greg and Sarah in 1991, just after I'd moved briefly to Austin, Texas. Greg had written the foreword to a book of poems and lyrics of mine, which he'd also helped to compile just before I'd left, quoting in the foreword both Graham Parsons, whom we loved, and Chris Whitley, whom we just discovered and would devour in coming years. The pen was for writing. Like the foreword, like the comments he'd made in private and in public about my music, and like the encouragement he would later lend my visual and art, the pen acknowledged creativity. That was like breath for Greg Haymes, acknowledging creativity. If you're a musician in this room, he wrote about your band. If you're a writer, he whispered in your ear. And if you're an artist, he stood in awe before your work. He participated in beauty. He offered support. He gave joy. If you knew him, he was blue, always, just under the surface. If you knew him, he was funny, sometimes with a sideways glance. If you loved him, as I did, you knew that you didn't know him at all. The last time I spoke with Greg, when he could still respond, he was sitting at his rustic dining room table, Sarah glowing by his shoulder. The table was an organized mess. If you knew him, he saved everything. If you knew him, he didn't eat. We, Greg Bowtie and I, sipped Bob Dylan's bourbon and dreamed about the future. Greg acknowledged creativity. He had promised himself to make more art, his truest calling. He sat there that day, making coffin paintings, some of which you saw, reversing the image with rubber cement, letting the murky liquid make a case for itself, letting the coffee or the bourbon, your choice, tell its story. I have too many stories. I can't tell them here. I don't have that many years. This is a set of oblique strategies. You can look it up. It's a worthwhile dilemma. Sarah handed me these shortly after his passing, written obsessively in Greg's beautiful hand on sticks of cardboard. Sly testament to both his invention and his frugality. Each is a suggestion, a path, self-portrait, coat of many colors, bulletproof heart. We had spoken about these cards, Eno's invention, years before. Greg's interpretation, pink and gray, lunatic fringe, sound and fury, the long road home, will inspire years on. Each card acknowledges creativity. Fuck sorrow. Fuck cancer. Write the words, sing the songs, paint the picture, create. Greg Haymes, dear friend, Greg Bell.
How are we doing out there? I actually wrote a speech because I usually come up here and ad lib and forget everything I'm going to say, so just bear with me while I try to read this. I first saw Greg Haymes when he was playing in the Star Spangled Washboard Band. They played fairly regularly at Siena while I was in attendance there, and I loved the band tremendously. I used to follow them around all over the place whenever I could see them. When I met him through a mutual friend, I was starstruck. He was the first professional musician I had ever met. He was one of the coolest people I'd ever met. He was talented, funny, friendly, and handsome. His smile would light up a room, and he had a wonderful laugh. We became close friends right from the moment we met. He introduced me to the Albany music scene, as well as the Lark Street scene, which at that time was pretty much the same thing. Through him, I met the other members of the band that would become Blotto, as well as almost every other local musician in the area. As a musician, he never failed to entertain. As a friend, he was always there if you needed him. At one point when I needed somewhere to stay for a couple months while waiting for an apartment to open up, I moved in with him. He was on the road with the washboard band. He needed somebody to keep an eye on his apartment. And when he'd come back, we would hang out and go to different clubs and see different bands together. When he worked at Ticketron at Stuyvesant Plaza, he knew I was a big deadhead. And back then, you didn't get tickets online or anything. You had to sleep out in the parking lot and wait to get and maybe get tickets. So instead of making me sleep out in the parking lot, he would just pull tickets every time a Dead show went on sale and call me up, and I would just go pick him up later on that day. I cannot imagine what my life would have been like if I hadn't met him. For years, every Thursday, I would pick up Metro or later the Times Union to see what was going on in town. If Greg said a band was worthwhile checking out, I did so without question. I never even thought about going out without reading his column first. When I started promoting shows, he would always give my shows a needed push. I could always count on him for information and his opinion about certain acts that I was thinking about bringing to town. As far as I'm concerned, there would not have been a music scene in the Capital District without him. And I'm pretty certain that there would not be any Guthrie Bell Productions without his influence on me. I'm going to miss him tremendously. He was a musician, a writer, an artist, but most of all, he was a wonderful human being and a great friend. I have many stories that I could tell about Greg, but the one that sticks out in my mind was once when I took a date to see the Washboard Band at some club up on Central Avenue, hoping she'd be impressed with me knowing the band and maybe I'd get lucky that night. So the band's playing, I'm saying, oh yeah, I know that. That's Wild Bill, and that's Broadway, and that's Bowtie. I know all those guys, and she's sort of looking at me like, who the hell is this guy? So all of a sudden, they're doing Rocky Raccoon, and at one point, when Rocky was collapsing in the corner, Greg decided to collapse on my table. So he came off the stage, spinning around, lands on top of my table, knocks the girl's drink right into her lap. While his intentions were good, that was my last date with that woman. Rest in peace, Greg. I love you, and I will see you on the other side. Thanks. Next up, one of the young guys, Bryan Thomas.
The kindest and truest words ever written about me and the music I make were written by Greg Haymes. Now, granted, there haven't been many words written about me and the music I make. I am yet another local schmokel musician who never really made it out of Albany. The three of you here tonight who are actually somewhat familiar with my music may recall a song on my second album that's all about the disappointment with the sales of my first album. The refrain is, you think you're too big for Schenectady, you ain't big enough. It should have been a hit. So that's basically my way of saying, be big enough to make art for the hometown. And the constant reminder for me to be big enough for all y'all in this room, to be big enough for Nippertown, was the encouragement I received from Greg Haymes over the last 2 decades in print, online, and in person. Because Greg wasn't just a cheerleader for local musicians, he got us. His knowledge and appreciation and love of art and music were so vast that he was able to engage with our music on our terms, even as local schmokels. No matter the genre, he knew where we were coming from. And that came through loud and clear when he reviewed in the pages of the Times-Union the little 6-song demo cassette tape. Yes, cassette tape. That I worked up the nerve to send him in 1998. It was my first review of anything ever. In 4 efficient sentences, this legend, whom I only knew from afar, let me know that he really got what I was trying to do. These days, I don't play out much. I mostly make music at home in my basement, which Greg would get on my case about. A lot. Sometimes even in print. Like in 2014, in a review of a joint show I did with my homegirl, Roseanne Ranieri, he wrote, neither one of them performs in concert very often, which is a crying shame or downright criminal, depending on your point of view. A running gag in our house for 11 years now is that we refer to Greg as my daughter Zoe's coloring buddy. Because on a Sunday afternoon in 2008, at an all-day fundraiser at the Lark Tavern, Greg sat down at our table and shared crayons and coloring books with her. It was so cool to watch. She was only 4, and the 2 of them were quietly coloring together while one local band after another took the stage and rocked our faces off. Later that night, I tried to impress upon her the magnitude of what had happened. I'm like, Zoe, nothing against you. I know you're really good at coloring for a 4-year-old, but it's crazy that you were coloring with the Greg Haymes. He's a legend. So I'd go through the whole thing, Star Spangled Washer Band, Blotto, MTV on day 1. Then I'd have to explain what MTV was. I showed her the videos. I told her that back in the day, Blotto was actually her Uncle Jim's favorite band, and he still had the vinyl and the VHS tape to prove it. And as she got older, I let her know that her coloring buddy was also now the avatar of music and arts in the Capital Region. He was everywhere, reviewing all shows at all times, usually had his review filed before I even got home from the concert. Because your coloring buddy is a wizard. He's Gandalf, but with better silver hair.
As a black man giving a white boy props for his hair, so you know the hair is blank.
My daughter made art with Greg when she was 4. I had to wait until I was in my late 40s. I'm profoundly grateful to Ed Atkinson and Kathy Frank and to Mr. Eck for asking me to provide background music for the Furlfons Players puppet show Picasso the Poet last year in Troy. Greg voiced the title role of Pablo Picasso, and I felt like one of the cool kids as his one-man backing band. I was Prince Rogers Blotto for a day. I've seen the video of the show on YouTube a couple of times in just the last couple of weeks. And a few minutes in, I start to forget the sadness, and I just start enjoying the play. I'm laughing along with Greg as he totally commits to Picasso's mediocre to bad poetry excursions. And then the play ends, the lights come up, and everyone comes forward to take a bow. Everyone except me. I'm still hiding on the side of the stage in the shadows, and Greg starts waving at me, calling me over to share in the applause. I can tell he is once again a little annoyed at me for my reluctance to come to the stage. So, thank you, Greg, a.k.a. Sarge, a.k.a. Wild Bill, a.k.a. Zoe's coloring buddy. Thank you for 20 plus years of pulling me out of the shadows.